Hi everyone, welcome to our virtual class for Class 4. I apologize for not being able to make it on Friday and for any inconvenience that caused. And I'm sorry that my substitute didn't show up. I contacted her and she had some confusion about the time of the class, so I really appreciate your guys' patience. In the meantime, you guys can be rest assured and be happy that you didn't end up picking up what I see as one of the most vile and annoying illnesses of all time. I don't know if that's empirically true in the history of mankind, but it sort of feels that way. So I'm glad you guys are healthy and safe, and hopefully this way we can move on with the important work that we have to do this week without you losing any time. I hope this will be a convenient way for you to pick up on the topics we have to cover this week, and hopefully it's a time-effective way to do this as well. First of all, I want to just point out how far you guys have come, and it becomes pretty obvious here. We looked at these last week, but I think they changed the headlines. These are the screenshots I got of the original headlines. You can see New York Appeals Court strikes down Defensive Marriage Act. You now know that this is not possible in a legal sense for a New York Appeals Court to strike down a federal law. Similarly, it's not just confined to national CNN-type news outlets. The LA Times also said that a New York court becomes the first to rule that gays and lesbians are a minority group deserving of special protection under the Constitution. We know that a New York court doesn't really have any binding thing it can say about the U.S. Constitution. Anything it says about the U.S. Constitution is just persuasive authority. So now, being expert researchers, you will see these kind of errors and note them. So let's talk briefly about what's coming up and where we are in terms of the class. I just finished submitting back the assignment 2s. You should have received those in your twin Dropbox. If you haven't received those yet, or if you have any questions about your assignment, please feel free to contact me and email me. I'll be passing back the quiz from last week in this next week's class. So let's talk about the next 2 weeks. This next Friday here, first of all, we're going to have the introduction of the research memo. This will be due, I believe for this class it's on November 16th, and it will focus on combining the skills that you've learned so far, locating relevant secondary sources, and locating relevant case law for a legal topic. Professor Brain will be here to discuss the issue, and he will go over it in some detail. He'll be here for 30 minutes this upcoming Friday. We'll also speak briefly about the role of regulations in research, and we'll do an in-class that focuses on the skills you'll need for the research memo. In week 6, our last week, we'll have a practicum, which will serve as an overall exercise of all the skills that you've learned in here. It'll function like an in-class exercise, and will build upon all the skills that you have already learned. And then it's back to legal writing. So let's talk about what we're going to do today. First, I'd like to just briefly look at assignment 2 and review a few notes on quiz 2. The second thing we want to do, we'll have the case law quiz. This is what I'm going to do with the case law quiz. I'm just going to post it as a Word document that you'll fill out and you'll bring back to class as your other exercises. So I'll post that at the same time as I post this video under course documents, under assignment Dropbox. Third, we're going to do a brief exercise today on citators and case law finding tools. I just want to make sure that this is an important skill we'll need for the research memo, and I want to make sure that we're as strong as possible on these skills before we move forward. Finally, we're going to discuss statutory law, and we're going to do a statutory law in class. I'll put up these exercises on the assignment Dropbox, and so you'll be able to just complete them and bring them to our next class. Let's talk about researching statutes. So let's discuss how we research statutes. The statutes, of course, are laws that are set forth by the legislative bodies of both the federal and the state government. They're sort of the bedrock of our legal system. We're going to go over the ways in which we locate statutes and the forms of legal publication that they appear in. We'll start this If you feel like it, feel free to watch it with I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill. I'm not going to force you to watch it in this video, though, although it does contain a much more succinct and merry version of how a bill becomes a law than I think is possible in a plain legal research lecture. The important thing to note is that it comes about through consensus, and it requires the signature of the executive to become law. So when laws are first passed, when they actually get out of committee, they're voted upon by both houses, and then they're signed by the executive into being law, it comes out first as a public law. These examples pertain to the federal government. I want you to note here when it says public law number, the first number under the public law number is the number of Congress that set forth that law. The second number there is the law number, it's the law that was passed in that chronological order in that year. So for example, for the 103rd Congress, it will start off, the first law they pass in that session will be 103-1. Then the second law they pass will be 103-2, and so on, until they get up to things like 103-336. It's helpful when you're looking at statutory authority to know what the abbreviations mean. Otherwise, it can look like a sort of impenetrable mess of jargon. But looking at the public law number, you can very easily tell what year, what date range it came from, and then also the order that it was published and that it became law. So that's the first iteration of a law. And so if something has just recently been passed, you'll only see the public law number. But after a while, the law is published in the statutes at large. It contains all the different laws that have been passed by the United States Congress since the dawn of time, since the beginning of our system. And these are arranged not like public law numbers. They're arranged first by the volume number and then by page number. This is just like other forms of publication that are published chronologically. They come in the exact order that something is published. So if you want to see the exact order, if you say the first law published in a given year, you can see the exact ordering of any laws in our public system. But then after a while, you can imagine if all our laws are just arranged by date, it becomes difficult to find relevant laws. So after a while, folks go through, they give it a certain subject assignment, and then they put it into one of the different codes. So the way this works is that there's 50 titles to the United States Code, and they cover different topics. So there's a list of the topics in your Legal Research Strategies book. And these are organized first by the title, so it's given a number. In California, that's different. They're published in the same way as in by this certain subject, except in California, it actually makes the subject clear. So here it just says 42 USC to show the subject matter that it belongs to. But in California, it would say Fish and Game Code plus the actual code it belongs to. And then it's followed by the section number. So that's how you can designate those. It's also worth pointing out that the United States Code is the official publication of the United States Congress, and it has all the laws that have been passed by subject. However, you're not going to do your research in the official version. Instead, you're going to be doing your research in the USCA or the USCS. These are published by West and Lexis respectively, and they have all sorts of annotations and footnotes, references to secondary sources, references to cases that interpret the law. They really round out the understanding of a given section within the United States Code. So you're going to be doing your research more in USCA on West or USCS on Lexis. These are keyed to be the exact same. So a citation to 42 USCA 12101 will match up to the United States Code of that same section number. There's a few different ways to find statutes. If you know the citation, by all means, that's the easiest way to locate it. If you know just the popular name, for instance, there's certain things such as the Patriot Act or the Affordable Care Act that are more well known by the title as opposed to their citation. And this is the popular name tables provide an index to what a law is commonly known as opposed to just the exact title that it was passed by. If you know the subject matter that you're looking in, you feel free to look into the index. You can also browse the code, just go through by title. These are getting less and less efficient as we go down. Or you can search for subject matter in the United States Code or the USCA or the USCS. So it goes from the most exact sort of to the most blunt of instruments in this list. If you're looking by citation, you already know how to do this. You'll just plug it into either the Find by Citation or the Quick Tools tab. Here are the popular name tables. So this shows many times when they publish a law, afterwards it'll say this law or this act is to be known as, and it will have the popular name there. So that's how you can locate it if there's some more common name it's called by. You can also see the index by subject. Here you've got abattoirs, a fancy word for slaughterhouses on the left. You can tell this wouldn't be super efficient. The best way to locate statutes, the best way to locate any form of primary law, as you already know, is to look at secondary sources first. But if you really need to find a general topic within the statutory codes, you can always use the index, or you can browse. So browsing would probably be the least effective, but it is interesting to look through the titles and to see what they contain. Let's go over quickly the notion of annotated codes. I want to highlight this. So an annotated code includes all these footnotes and value-added resources that will help you to locate more material about the given section. Generally, when you look at the law, it's just going to have a very plain-faced appearance. It oftentimes won't be very clearly defined or have all the details or parameters set out. So an annotated code will include citations to federal case law that has interpreted certain provisions of the code. It will also have citations to regulations. Regulations and statutes work hand in hand, and they're of equal force. The regulations oftentimes provide a level of detail that statutes cannot provide. And it's one of the assertions by lots of people and firms that the biggest problem that new associates have when they come out of law school is not being able to appreciate the importance of regulations. So I don't want that to be a problem for us. When you're looking at any statute, always check the annotated codes and always go through and check for any references to regulations. The references to regulations will appear as CFR for the federal government, that's the Code of Federal Regulations, or as CCR for California Code of Regulations. So again, you're not going to be using the official source, the official codes to do your research in. You're going to be using annotated codes that contain all these citations and value-added features to help you really flesh out a subject and to know all there is about it, to provide really detailed analysis. One note, though, even though the annotations are super helpful, the only text of the statute is the primary law. So you can't just use the secondary source citation. Similarly, if you're using any of the annotations as you go through, go ahead and click through and make sure you read the primary law they're referencing. You don't just reference it out of the blue without having read it. Always go through, reference the primary law, and make sure it's current and up to date. So that's about all we have about researching statutes. But I want to go over, make a few things very clear. So when you're working with federal collections of statutes, and generally collections of statutes, we call them codes. Sets of regulations are also called codes. The official federal code is called the United States Code, USC. But then you're mostly going to be using the unofficial ones. United States Code Annotated, USCA, and the United States Code Service, published by Lexis, USCS. In California, you're going to be looking for statutory resources that will say CA, and then it'll have a subject, such as California Corporations Code section, and it'll have the section number. Remember that California doesn't have an official publication. Instead, we have West California Code and Deering's California Code. So if you see those, don't be deterred. That is actually how California statutes are referred to. And on that note, if you are following along, you can move to the statutory law in class exercise.